Welcome back, everyone, to the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. I am Jesse Collings, joined by my co-host, Jason Ounpraseuth. Jason, how are you doing today?
I think you cut off there for a bit, but yeah, I'm doing well. Hopefully, nothing too crazy happens in response to this, because I don't know, Jesse. I don't know if you noticed that coincidentally, there've been some strange things. Like when we did our Ring of Honor episode, after that, Ring of Honor just decided to shut down. And then when we did our indie episode, that was the same week that bunch of mass cuts happened in WWE. And our recent episode, where we talked about, wasn't specifically about New Japan, but we had talked about New Japan and how they're going to handle Wrestle Kingdom and the title situation. And all of a sudden, night three turns out to be New Japan versus Noah. And so it's a lot of crazy things that coincidentally happened after our episode's
Yeah, I'm
release.
trying to think. Are we recording these podcasts on a Native American burial ground, or are we? Did you ever read? Did you ever read Matt Christopher books like as a kid?
Um, I might have, but I not known the author. I
Yeah,
might have just
he's
known the
he's.
names.
I don't even know if he's actual like how many of these books he actually wrote, but he wrote like a chapter books for like kids like in like fourth and fifth grade, and they were all sports based. And there was it was one of those things where like Matt Christopher was probably someone who wrote like the first 20, and then like a bunch of ghostwriters wrote like
Yeah.
500 subsequent books.
Mhm.
But there was one I remember as a kid where these kids get a um like one of those hockey games with like the like it's like a foosball but with hockey.
Okay. Yep.
Like they get one of those and they play
Yep.
it, and like stuff that uh happens in the foosball hockey game like starts happening in like their like real life hockey games. Like they they like lose the puck, and then like their game gets canceled, and like one of the players like the guy gets like cut in half, and like the player, and then in the real game like someone breaks their leg. And I don't know I don't remember the name of it, but I remember the plot very well. But maybe we have some sort of mojo going on here where what we say is speak into existence. I don't know how that's going to be the case though today. Um, and please let me know if I'm cutting out, because that would be an issue. Um, but what we are talking about today is we each came up with a list of 10, and we're going to go over our 10 best wrestlers under the age of 30. And we kind of talked a little bit off air about like what our philosophy was going to be for this list, but I kind of think it's helpful if we maybe approached it a little bit differently, but I don't know if that's the case. I will say that I approached this based off of um, if I was starting a wrestling promotion today, what are some of the talent under the age of 30 I would want to have? And I kind of looked at what people have already accomplished, how big of a star they are, how many have they headlined big shows before, have they worked the main event before, and then also looked at what they could do in the future. So it's kind of what have you accomplished and what you can do in the future. I didn't look at it as a pure like prospects, like I kind of like what can these people do for me over the next 10 years. It was kind of half and half between what you've already accomplished and what you can do in the future. I don't know how did you look at it?
Yeah, I think for some people on my list, I approached it similar to yours, but I think for others who are at least under 25, I did kind of approach it as like, okay, what is their potential 10 years from now? Could they be a main eventer in their own respective promotion? Could they be a bigger star in other places? And, et cetera, et cetera. And so I did like half and half of that, mostly depending on their age. Like usually people under 25, I approached it that way. But for those over 25, yeah, I kind of did approach it as like, this is like the young star I would sort of make a centerpiece of my promotion, theoretically.
Yeah, the idea for this came from a column that Phil Lindsay over at Bleacher Report wrote, where he ranked kind of the top 10 AEW and WWE stars under the age of 30. And he really looked at like what they had already accomplished, and
Yeah.
not necessarily as much as what they are looking for in the future. But that was kind of the idea for this. And I wanted to expand it to other promotions because there are some people that I have that are not in AEW or WWE. And really just kind of look at it as kind of like a fun discussion about talent that, for the next will be around for the next 10 and 15 years. And some of these guys, I would say, are definitely in their prime, and some of them are probably a few years away from their prime. And the other thing I wanted to add was I didn't approach this like I'm building a roster that only contains these talent. So I didn't go overboard on like, all right, I need a top singles guy, I need a tag team, I need a female wrestler. I kind of just took everybody and put it together, assuming that I'm going to have some other headlining stars that maybe are over 30 in my hypothetical promotion.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, same here. Yeah, like obviously, like it's not advantageous to make a promotion full of young people. Obviously, ideally, that'd be great. But you do definitely need some of those veterans, and AEW has shown that. Yeah, you need some veterans to carry the promotion at first, and then younger guys will, grow as the promotion grows.
Mm-hmm. And one additional thing is, I did not rank. These are not. Look, number one is my first pick. Number two is my second pick.
Yep.
I didn't want to compare and contrast these people to each other necessarily. It's more of just a general list, and because there are people on here for very different reasons. Some like you said, Jason, some of these people are like in their primes now. Some of them are, I'm already like what I see, and I expect even greater things in the future. But let's get things started. I guess we'll take turns. We'll take turns on our revealing our names. We don't know each other's lists. I'm anticipating that we probably have some of the same names, but Jason, why don't you go first? Why don't you hit me with a name and we could talk about them for a little bit?
Okay, I'll just start off with the first person that sort of pops to my head when you came to me with this idea. It was Jay White. He is on the edge of 30. He's 29 years old. This year was kind of an interesting year for Jay White. He started off very hot with the Ibushi match and obviously his other Wrestle Kingdom matches. Then obviously, things with the pandemic made things kind of complicated, especially for foreign nationals who had to, they had to go to Japan, they had to quarantine, and we've heard reports and different other rumblings that foreign talent weren't exactly happy with that situation. Seems like New Japan found a compromise with having those guys in New Japan strong, and so they could just hang out where they live in the US, like Jay White is doing, and just work New Japan still while also working indies as well. However, for his breadth of what he has done, he's shown a lot of main event potential. He's obviously, technically he has won the championship, but I don't think people really count that as an actual title reign. But yeah, he's definitely won lots of championships for New Japan. He has shown fantastic character work as a heel. Like, I know people kind of poo-poo Bullet Club, but I think his leadership as Bullet Club, at least pre-pandemic, was pretty good. He established it in his own sort of identity, and has really helped his own character, and he has shown babyface potential as well. If he ever turns babyface, like most people kind of anticipated after his press conference at Wrestle Kingdom, but he has shown fantastic in-ring work and character work as well.
Yeah, I do have Jay White on my list, but he was not my first choice, and I actually thought about him for a while if I wanted to include him. And it's really tough for me because I think Jay White is incredibly talented, really one of the most talented people in wrestling when you consider his in-ring ability, his look, his promos, his character work. He's really a guy who just really cares a lot about what he's doing in wrestling, and he really is concerned about what story he's telling, what is kind of the long journey that his character is going on, how he should be a heel, how he can eventually perhaps be a babyface. But he's just had a completely lost year. I was so high on him after Wrestle Kingdom. Like you said, he had that great main event against Kota Ibushi, and he came up short, and he gave that press conference where he was like hinting that he wanted to retire, and he was just totally despondent. And I was thinking, okay, we're going to get this big, long, year-long storyline where Jay White is doubting himself and he wants to retire and he can't believe he keeps losing at Wrestle Kingdom. And we're going to get the payoff where he wins the world title at Wrestle Kingdom, maybe next year. But he's just been lost since then. And like you said, the pandemic has made it difficult. Travel in Japan is very difficult. There's a lot. He's far from the only, foreign talent that hasn't been in Japan that much this year. but you're right. As far as like, especially if you look at what they've already accomplished, he's been, he won the IWGP championship already. He's already, he headlined Wrestle Kingdom. We're talking about someone who's done a lot as a pro wrestler and is extremely talented. So it would be wrong to keep him off the list, but I probably wasn't as high on him as you.
Yeah, I think also like for New Japan, especially, like if you're part of their dojo system, they definitely favor you a lot more than other talents, for the most part, at least, and Jay White definitely was one of those dojo guys, along with other guys in his class, Juice Robinson, David Finley, and he's obviously, surpassed those guys in his class. I guess his future is kind of questionable. It's always kind of been up in the air whether he'll go to WWE or not. I think he did an interview with Sean Ross Sapp recently, sort of like, denying all those rumors before about his New Japan contract, his talks with AEW as well. And so it's just kind of up in the air whether he'll actually stay in New Japan. I kind of think he still does. I don't really see what purpose he would have in WWE other than just, like just the recognition he would get from television and all that. But other than that, like, I don't really see any other reason he would leave New Japan. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't know, because I would have said, oh, there's no way he's leaving New Japan if you asked me that question in January. But now I don't know, because he hasn't been in New Japan, and he hasn't gone over there. And I don't know if he'll be there for Wrestle Kingdom. I kind of assume he will, but it's going to be tough with, the restrictions going back in place on foreign travel for, due to the Omicron variant in Japan and how seriously they've taken COVID-19 in Japan. I don't know if he'll be there. Like I said, I'm just really disappointed in how his 2021 worked out. But I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to think. There's not a lot. I do have a few. There's not a lot of WWE people on my list. WWE is not the place to go if you're a young person, and expect to push and expect to be, presented prominently. And he's a guy that cares like a lot about what he's doing and his promos and his storylines and what story he's telling it. And it doesn't seem like someone that would work well in WWE. It kind of feels like a Jon Moxley thing, where Moxley was just kind of driven insane by the scripting and him having no control over his own personality and how much that really bothered him. And from what I can gather, White seems similar. I will now go with one of mine, and a lot of similarities to Jay White, but I'm going with Will Osprey. I don't really need to spend too much time on Will Osprey. He's 28 years old. He's been a top star for a number of years already. He hasn't headlined Wrestle Kingdom, so maybe he hasn't quite had some of the big moments that Jay White has had necessarily, but we're talking about a former IWGP World Champion, maybe current IWGP World Champion. Obviously, look, we'll be headlining Wrestle Kingdom this year, the second night of Wrestle Kingdom. He'll be, or next year, I guess, in 2022. One of the best in-ring workers I've ever seen in my life already, and he has been for a number of years. I think people will have mixed views on like his personality and how good his heel run has been so far. I think it's been kind of a mixed bag. I think he, like Jay White, has been hurt by the pandemic and the lack of crowd responses when he's in Japan, and then obviously his time not in Japan. But I think, like, if you were to say like who's the best wrestler under the age of 30, I would say Will Ospreay, no question. So I mean, he's just an easy call for me.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. Like, just like we're taking his in-ring work, just solely looking at that, like he's like probably one of the top 3 best in the world, just like out of any age. But yeah, under 30, he's like the best in the world in the ring. Yeah, like his personality wise, in terms of his character, it's been interesting, especially when he's developing his own faction, United Empire. I think it has kind of worked there. I think we're still waiting to see what a full version of this faction looks like, since all of them have all been spread out to various different countries, Japan, the UK, and the United States. And so we haven't really seen them all together. It all still kind of seems separated. Everyone like Jeff Cobb, Okan, and Hanare just kind of doing their own thing in the tag league, while Aussie Open, Osprey are kind of doing their own thing in the US and the UK. But yeah, just like in the ring, without a doubt, one of the best. And yeah, I mean, I guess maybe he needs his Wrestle Kingdom moments, perhaps, to maybe win the title to really cement himself. But he's really done so much already. And it's kind of interesting thought experiments because he and Ricochet were kind of New Japan around the same time, and New Japan were kind of more all in on Osprey than Ricochet. And it's kind of an interesting, different universe if like they went the other way around. If they decide to go with Ricochet as the top guy instead of Osprey, it's kind of an interesting thought experiment there.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, one thing, Osprey is just bigger than Ricochet physically, which made him more credible as like into the heavyweight division. He obviously added size in between those runs, but at the time when they were in New Japan together, Ricochet was like ahead of Osprey. Ricochet was winning the junior title and he was winning the Best of Super Juniors. And if I get I might have the timeline wrong, but it's like Ricochet leaves and then kind of Osprey is pushed into Ricochet's spot as like the top foreigner in the junior heavyweight division, I guess, along with Marty Scurll at the time. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Ricochet is over 30. But
yeah, that's why
the career is, Ricochet's career going to WWE is a bad choice. Maybe not financially, and maybe he's happy there, but as a wrestling fan, if he doesn't go to WWE, he's probably a reasonably pushed star in AEW, if not a top star, and would have had a lot more opportunities in Japan. But yeah, it's obviously their careers went different paths. There's I'll save this point for a later one, but there's a similar kind of divided path between someone who went to WWE and somebody who did not. And one of them might be he's not on my list. He might be on your list, but we'll see. You want to go next?
Yeah. And so the other person I thought of right away was Utami Haya Shishita from Stardom. She's the current World of Stardom champion. It's kind of interesting discussion among Stardom fans whether she'll lose the title at the end of the month in their Sumo Hall show against Shiri in their big epic rematch. No time limit there, so no time limit draw there, which Stardom seems to be addicted to. Like if I don't know how Stardom you're watching, Jesse, but like Stardom has been doing a lot of time limit draws, more so than usual. A lot of their matches, Utami has been part of some of them. Of course, one of them probably match of the year, at least up in discussion for some people, at least with Shiri back in June, back when they had a time limit draw, then they went an extra couple minutes, and then still couldn't decide a winner. I think got for 5.5 stars or something from Dave Meltzer. One of the highest women's matches he's ever rated since the 90s.
Yeah, that match with Shuri from June definitely got more attention than any other Stardom match, at least in the West, as far as people talking about it and people going out of their way to watch it. And so that was definitely a key thing. And you can look at Utami and you can look at several other people in Stardom, really, but you can see the growth in the promotion has had over the last few years. Being acquired by Bushiroad helped, but yeah, I mean, she's on my list as well. She's only 23. And the interesting thing about her being only 23 is that a lot of times especially in Joshi promotions, like the wrestlers start so young. So you could be 23 and be like an 8 or 9 year veteran.
Yeah.
That's pretty common. And I don't think Utami only started like a few years ago. She started at like 20 or 19. And that's a huge accomplishment. So she got a big push right away, and there was some resentment about, they're just pushing this rookie like to the moon. But really one of the most complete performers out of anyone on this list. And the fact that she's only 23, I know in Joshi 23 is like not actually that young, but it does open up a lot of opportunities for her to continue to improve, especially when you consider that she doesn't have 10 years of experience.
Yeah, and again, like you said, Stardom pushed her right away. She I think she had 3 belts in her first year. So that's how much they pushed her. She's getting close to 10th title defense, which retire of Io Shirai Whether they want to do that or not, put it up there with one of the best, performers in their history, I have no idea. And so it's kind of makes it interesting to see how her title run will be. But it has been a very good title run for her, and yeah, she has unlimited potential in my opinion. Like you said, Joshi 23 isn't really that young, especially with since some performers they start out like some I considered as honorable mentions, but some of them start out when they're 16 and they're still wrestling now. And so yeah, but still, like you said, a complete performer, and nothing really else, no real flaws in her game, I think, at least as of right now.
All right, and so I'll move on. I'll go on to another guy that I feel like is a complete no-brainer. And if you don't have him on your list, Jason, if any, not you, Jason, anybody doesn't have him on this list, what are you doing? It's MJF, who's only 25, which is crazy. Like again with Will Osprey, I feel like I don't really have to explain this one that much, because I think every single person that watches AEW knows that MJF is like an incredibly talented person. Right now, he's, going jab for jab with CM Punk in a feud. He's pretty much consistently he's consistently one of the most entertaining people in wrestling. Just, there's never a time where like he's off for me. Like every time he comes up for a segment, when he's talking, it's always, you have to pay attention to what he's saying. It's never, some of the stuff might be corny at times, but sometimes that's the point. Like even when the CM Punk feud, some of the stuff he says, like, oh, he's calling like a CM stands for like cooking meth or something like that. I'm like, that's not really that funny, but it's kind of the fact that it's not funny kind of is the point, in the sense that it's like this cheap, lame joke that this guy is saying to pop himself. And he's just, he's a complete performer. And I think people are starting to catch on to that, but still probably going to be underrated. He'll probably always be underrated as an in-ring guy because he does the other stuff so well. But he's a really good wrestler. I mean, really good. And he showed that with his match against Darby Allen at Full Gear, where they just went out and they had a very traditional wrestling match where they went through holds and Darby made a comeback and MJF cut him off and built his heat. And the finish was classic, where he hit him with hit him with the dynamite diamond ring. And then he used the side headlock takedown to pin him when he was knocked out, to kind of as the heel thing. I can beat you with a headlock takeover. But yeah, just a complete performer, checks all the boxes. Would be very surprised if like his career fizzles out.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe if he went to WWE and they misused him, maybe that wouldn't be that surprising. But he just seems like, if you ask anybody who watches AEW at all, and you said you're starting a wrestling promotion, pick 5 guys to start with, MJF, because of his excellence and because of his youth, is going to get named every time.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, everything he does is very purposeful. There's very little things that he does that are just by accident. Maybe just a line or two that he thinks of during a promo, maybe in that case. But for the most part, his character is very purposeful. I think that's why sometimes like he says a lot of insider type of things, like he mentions like Bruce Pritchard sometimes in his promos as well. And like it's very purposeful because he understands that the audience knows what he's talking about when he references all these insider type of things, all these news stories and all that. I can kind of understand why, like, you might not be into that. It just seems like to be too insidery, but I think, like you said, it's very purposeful what he does. And yeah, he's on my list as well. Just insane that he is 25 and he brags about that. I'm 25 years old, a future world champion. And it would be kind of surprising if he never did win the world title. I don't know if it's, just maybe just a bit, he'll keep saying he's the future world champion, but never actually win the world title. Seems like something WWE would actually do, maybe not AEW, but it's just something funny to think about. But yeah, like with MJF, he has his own faction, the Pinnacle, which I guess from a faction point of view, it does seem kind of be a bit off. He's mostly just hanging out with Wardlow, and that seems to be a future feud. And I think that's the thing of MJF, is that with his character, he really does set up a lot of future feuds with a lot of people. Like you can definitely tell that this current CM Punk feud, I feel like it is kind of a pseudo number one contenders type of feud, where whoever comes out of that will challenge Hangman Page for the title. Presumably MJF would. It kind of makes logical sense in that sort of sense, but you never know. Maybe Punk gets a chance at the title or anything like that. And that's the thing too of MJF with his character is that he can eat losses and it doesn't really affect him. It doesn't really hurt his character any more or any less if he does lose. Obviously, it was good to beat Darby Allen to get into the CM Punk feud, but even if he lost, I don't think it would hurt him that much.
Yeah, and I think having an element of vulnerability is important for his character because it's a fine line. You want him to be like a badass in some ways and be actually a good wrestler because in that way it gives him credibility as a challenger, and he's not like this Miz-like figure where like no one takes him seriously because they're like a crappy wrestler. But at the same time, you also want him to be vulnerable. You want him to kind of be arrogant, have an undeserved sense of arrogance about him, which is tough to do because, he brags about being, this super talented young guy, and he is the super talented young guy. So you want to have some variance. So if he's, overlooking his own losses and overlooking his own faults, that adds to his persona. But yeah, so far we're 4 for 4 on names, which I was not expecting. Would you like to say another name and see if we continue this trend?
I think you were hinting at this guy before, and I'll mention him now. I have Jungle Boy on my list. He's currently 24 years old, and he has been an interesting trajectory with AEW. He was brought in, he's currently in a tag team and a trios with Luchasaurus and Marco Stunt. However, most people definitely see his trajectory more as a singles wrestler rather than a tag team wrestler. That's not to say anything bad about Luchasaurus. Luchasaurus is a very good performer, has a great look, but I think definitely people have seen the potential as a single star. Of course, this year he had his match with Kenny Omega, which probably won't be in a match of the year contender type of list, but it was still a fantastic sort of match to really build this guy up as a future star. And obviously, he's had some other underrated matches, that probably won't be in a match of the year contender sort of list, like Dax Harwood. That's a fantastically worked match. He's obviously a very great worker, and he's gaining experience by working with all the other veterans. He's currently, sort of like buddies with Christian Cage, and that's kind of, I'm sure behind the scenes, Christian is helping him, work out his timing. That's all his other character stuff and all that there. And I think he does have the tools to be a future star. Obviously, has a very addictive theme song that even the heel commentators like Taz sing along with.
Yeah, I don't have Jungle Boy on my list. And the reason I didn't was mainly because I think he has a lot of areas to improve. Yeah. And like you said, he's only 24. So he's got so much time that it's not really a problem. Like some people will compare him to the other like 4 young pillars that AEW keeps bringing up. And they'll say, well, he's not like MJF. He's not as ready as MJF, which he's not, but he's only 24. And so we're talking about someone who, really is probably 8 or 9 years away from being like at the start of their prime. Like, honestly, most wrestlers peak between 35 and 45. Maybe that changes in AEW where there's younger talent getting opportunities earlier, but that's really where most talent comes. So he's got so much time to get better at promos and, learn, be better, be more outwardly charismatic, and to change, maybe tweak his character. Maybe he adds more size. Like, there's so much that could happen with him that at this point, when I looked at the people that I had, I was like, I don't think he's really as accomplished as these people. And I still think he has so much more room for improvement. And so I feel like adding him is more of a long play in the sense that one day he will be this super duper big star. But I think there's a lot of things he has to do between now and then to hit that. And I'm not saying I'd be bullish that he's going to do it because he's very accomplished, he's very talented and he's already done a lot, by the time he's 24. But I think there's a long way to go with him. So that's why I kept him off, but he's a totally understandable point.
Yeah, I definitely agree that, promo wise, I think he has a lot to improve on that. I definitely think he seems a bit hesitant in some of his promos and his character work. I think, like you said, he needs to show more outward charisma rather than just like, just stand in the corner and look cool. I think there's a lot more to he can improve on the charisma end of things. But yeah, that was more so my play. Like, he's still 24. I think he has so much to improve in the future to be a legitimate future world champion in AEW.
Yeah, and he has what he has more than anything is just an innate ability to connect with the crowd and get the crowd to cheer for him. It's just a natural babyface thing that you kind of either have or you don't. And it's really carried him throughout his career. I remember when he first wrestled in PWG, and he really only had like a year or two of real experience as a wrestler at the time. And I remember Dave Meltzer, who was at the PWG show, said, they had Jungle Boy, who's Perry's son, and he's not that experienced, but the crowd really liked him. And he really wasn't up to PWG standards in the ring at that time. And he did some athletic stuff, but not like any crazy athletic stuff like some of the other guys would do. But the crowd just liked him. And he got over even though he really wasn't ready for that spot. And that a lot of that feels like his career in AEW has kind of followed that model where he's always been probably more over than maybe his natural skill set would permit him to be. And it's because he has that innate ability to get people to cheer for him, to get people invested in his matches, to get people feel like they were rooting for him. So yeah, he's definitely a good pick.
All right. So who's your fifth person?
See, I have to listen. I'm just I'm going out of order. Like I said, they're not ranked like
yeah,
1
exactly.
through 10.
Yeah,
so
same.
Let's talk about Kaito Kiyomiya.
Okay, yep.
So Kaito Kiyomiya from Pro Wrestling Noah, for people who don't know, is 25 years old. A few years ago, he was pushed maybe a little bit early. He was given the GHC World Championship and was expected to kind of be the new face of Pro Wrestling Noah. And it kind of had mixed results. It was too early to push him at that level. The crowd didn't really buy him at that level. And so he lost the title, and they didn't really hit the reset button on him totally, but they did kind of take him down a level. But him losing the title gave himself a little bit more purpose. And I feel like in the year or two since that he's lost the title, he's done much better, and he feels, and you see him now in his matches, he's wrestling Kano or Katsuhika Nakajima. Like, he just feels like he's more ready, and he's at the level that they wanted him to be a few years ago, and he's still only 25 years old. So in that way they've played off. The gamble has paid off. Maybe he didn't get over when he was 22, but now that he's 25, he's at the level that they want him to be at. And like I said, 25 years old, already been a world champion, already used to main eventing shows for Noah. Noah's business kind of goes up and down over the last few years. They've had some successes, they've had some failures. They had the whole Muto experience this year. And he stands on the verge. He's going to be, do you know who's he been calling out for the Noah New Japan show?
I believe wasn't Tanahashi?
Yeah, it might have been Tanahashi. But yeah, he'll be prominently featured in the Noah New Japan show, which is an arena show. He might have a big singles match. He might beat one of the top guys in New Japan, because if you're Noah, you're like, who do we want? If we have a guy who's going to beat a New Japan guy, it'd probably be, Kiyomiya, because he's still considered the future of Pro Wrestling Noah. And so I think there's just not that many guys, especially when you consider that he's only 25, that have accomplished what he's accomplished already. And he's still on an upward trajectory, I feel like, despite, maybe some setbacks being pushed a little bit too early.
I just looked it up. He called out Okada. That was the one. That's the guy he called.
Yeah, so I knew it was either Okada or Tanahashi. Or Shingo. It was one of those three. But yeah.
But in the press conference, he was face to face with Tanahashi. I think that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, so I would be surprised if he beat Okada. I could see him perhaps beating Tanahashi because Tanahashi's at the job stage of his career in some ways. But still, I mean, if he wrestles Okada, at the Yokohama Arena, that's a big deal, even if he loses.
Yeah.
But, he's definitely someone who I feel like if you're looking at young talents, I know Pro Wrestling Noah is not the biggest promotion, but would be somebody that you would have to consider for this under any circumstances.
Yeah, he's definitely someone on my list as well. Just because like Noah's, I think, obviously with him getting the title so early, like Noah, like you said, has been so up and down. They're really trying to find, that next big star for themselves to really just find stability for their promotion. And right now Kiyomiya is that guy. And he had carried himself very well. Now he definitely, when you see him, if you see him in that press conference with, standing in front of Tanahashi, he looks so legitimate. It doesn't really seem like he's lesser than anyone else in that press conference. When he's in the ring of Go Shiozaki, he definitely can tell that, oh, he's on the same level as him, as Keno as well. Seems like they might feud again for the national title. Seems like the direction they're going for in their the January 1st show, and so he might win that title, perhaps against Keno. I don't honestly don't follow Noah that closely to know the storylines, but I have seen enough of Kiyomiya to see that, okay, this is why they're pushing this guy, and he is a legitimate star for them.
Yeah, and even if it was too early for him originally when he got the title, I still think that it's the right kind of move, and I appreciate Noah making that move because they're looking at their world title scene, they're looking at their main event scene, and you have now Michi Marufuji, who's getting older, and has had injuries and is probably slowed down. You had Go Shiozaki, who's now been out for almost the entire year this year, but was older as well. Takashi Tsujira, who is old but still somehow in like unbelievable physical shape, even though he's in his 50s. But right, they wanted to find who's going to be our new guy that we can elevate into a new position and be our new top guy. And they found someone, one of their young kids who they thought had a lot of potential, and they didn't waste any time and they pushed him. And like I said, it maybe didn't pay off right away in the sense that his world title reign kind of fizzled out, but I think now you kind of seen the value of what they got out of that by pushing him at that stage of his career. And Nakajima has had a really good 2021. That helps because he's 33, I think.
Yep.
And then you also have Kano, who's in his mid 30s too. So they kind of have they also did the Kichi Muto thing this year, which Kichi Muto is not on this list.
I think
if we expanded the list another 30 years, I don't know if he'd still be on it. But he's it's one of those things where it's like, I think that it maybe didn't work out right away, but over time has kind of proven itself to be right. And he's still got 5 more years before he's 30. He's got, Tsujira is, still wrestling at a high level, Noah, and he's in his early 50s. So we have 20, 25 years more of Kiyomiya potentially. Yeah, so that he's definitely someone that I think would be on a lot of people's lists if they follow Noah.
All right. So moving on to my 6th person. This is kind of tough to sort of narrow down, but I kind of went with someone who has already accomplished a lot and more of a current, mainstay star, and that's Mayu Iwatani from Stardom. She's 28 years old. She's been in the business about 10 years now, and her career, she started out as, for those who don't know, she's part of the big 3 from the original Stardom group, Io Shirai and Kairi Hojo, or Kairi Sane. She was known in WWE, and she's really accomplished herself, winning the red belts and the white belts, multiple. She won and many other titles as well. She's won the red belt like 2 times, and she has won the white belt 2 times, the Wonder of Stardom title, and just accomplishing so much with Stardom, with all the big matches she's been a part of, and now she's sort of in this veteran type role, helping build up the younger stars or the newer talents that they're pushing right now, and sort of like, I guess, similar to the Tanahashi role, if I want to use the New Japan example, she's more just putting over other stars, but she'll still get some big wins here and there to establish her own credibility. And it was kind of interesting at one point. She did win the Women of Honor title for Ring of Honor for a bit there, and so it seems like be a partnership with Ring of Honor for a bit at that during that time, but it didn't really flourish into anything else other than that. I think there has been some rumblings that WWE and AEW were kind of looking at her Obviously Brandy, she has worked in Stardom before, and so I'm sure maybe she put out some flyers on whether any Stardom wrestlers want to join AEW or not. There's no really concrete evidence towards that, just more rumors amongst fans. But yeah, Mayu Iwatani makes my list here.
Yeah, she's really been like you pointed her out as like the Tanahashi role. Like, oh, she can put people over, but occasionally gets a win too. And it's crazy because she's 28. And she's like in this veteran Tanahashi like role. But Joshi's a different world in the sense that 28 is not like considered young like it is in the male side. And the other thing with her is that she's really been the glue for that company as they've lost names. They've obviously had people like Io Shirai leave for WWE. They've had retirements and everything like that. That she has been the person that's kind of kept the different eras of Stardom together as talent comes and goes, and Stardom's always so good about elevating new talents. And like we talked about with Utami, is Utami's almost like the functional ace of the promotion, in that sense, where she's like, we're kind of building everything around her. There's some other people, like Julia and Momo Watanabe, who's like are in the mix and play similar roles. But Iwatani is always the person you can rely on if you need to have a good match. There's someone that can lose. They have established credibility. So yeah, she wasn't on my list, but yeah, it totally makes sense to have her. Sticking in the women's wrestling theme, I have Sasha Banks, who is only 29 years old, who I would have guessed was over 30, just because she's been on WWE television for a while, and usually that means you're over 30. But she's still 29. I think she'll be 30 next like January or February, so she's almost 30. But obviously, I think there's a case to be made that Sasha Banks is the best American female wrestler of all time. I think she, out of the people in WWE and the four horsewomen, she's the most well-rounded in the sense that I think she's the best in-ring worker, out of that group. And I also think that she's, in some ways, I think Becky Lynch is probably more charismatic, but Banks is pretty close in the sense of how charismatic she can be. There's been a lot of matches over the years and roles where she's been asked to do stuff that needed someone of really high caliber to pull off, and she's done it. I think the WrestleMania match against Bianca Belair, I think that ended up taking place like so much better than it might have been if someone else was in that role. I know it's not a knock on Bianca, but I think Sasha should get a lot of credit for how successful that match was and how good that match was, and being put into that spot. I think she's been effective as a babyface. I think she's been effective as a heel. Just incredibly accomplished, really out of anyone that I could find as far as like pure accomplishments. It's kind of be tough to beat Sasha Banks. It's probably either her, Osprey, or Jay White. I would say those are the only three that really on the level as far as just being able to headline big shows, being incredibly famous, and just everything that goes in with that.
Yeah, I think because of the age thing, being 29, she just barely missed my top 10. But like you said, she's accomplished so much. And I definitely believe that out of the four horsewomen, I think she's the most sort of giving performer. I think she does a lot. She definitely is the best at making her opponent look better. I think, we could look at very circumstantial evidence with Charlotte and Becky Lynch, how, they haven't really elevated anyone, at least significantly, as someone like Sasha Banks has proven before. I mean, even in the Charlotte Sasha Banks feud, I think Sasha Banks was more than pivotal for that feud to really take off and really become, as big as it was, with those main event matches. They don't really happen without her. I don't think you could really have Charlotte and anyone else in that position there. And, with Sasha Banks, it does seem a very weird sort of thing where WWE, they want to push her, but it doesn't really seem like they ever go all the way with her as they do with Charlotte or Becky Lynch. And, there's many different reasons for that, or maybe just a Vince thing where, Vince just wants to push, certain people, and he like Sasha Banks, but not as much as Charlotte or Becky.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about how giving of a performer she is. And she really is, like, as far as like, and you can go back to that WrestleMania match and see, it's not just that she did a job and put Bianca over, it's how you put someone over, and it's how you don't give yourself an out. You do a good job cleanly, you let the other person have a lot of offense and take a lot of the match. She really is a very giving performer in that regard, in a way that some of the other top performers in WWE, male or female, aren't. And part of that is booking and stuff like that. So it's not solely on the performers, but I think it's hard to look at her. And like you said, she missed your list because of you had more of a long view on like age. And there's been a lot of talk about like a double standard in the wrestling business, where women are not like allowed to be wrestle after 40.
Yep.
Mickie James has been very vocal about that. Other people have been very vocal about that. And it's absolutely true. But if you look at, I'm not an expert, so I don't want to go out and say this, but if you look at a lot of women's sports across the board, women typically retire earlier than men. And part of that is social pressure. And part of that is physical development could be different. Women tend to mature earlier than men. So you get more likely for women, if you looked in the Olympics, there's way more female athletes competing at the age of like 15 or 16 than there are male athletes competing at the same age. And so like 29 for a woman, whether it's because of an institutional pressure or not, is older than it is for a man. It just is. In wrestling, and that's the case. Now, Sasha Banks could wrestle until she's 60 years old. That wouldn't necessarily surprise me, because she seems like someone that really likes wrestling, and doesn't seem to be sticking her feet. Oh, I mean, I say that, but then she was in the Mandalorian, so maybe
that's true.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it is a reasonable question to ask. Like, if you're 29 years old in WWE and you've been in WWE for a number of years as a woman performer, I mean, the average track record of a woman's career in WWE is not very long. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. But I do think that, it's reasonable to say, like, is Sasha Banks being 29 the same as Jay White being 29? Or I don't know if that, I don't know. I think that's an actual, questions that would be asked if you think about like long-term future.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look at, female athletes and shoot sports. Serena Williams, she's a trailblazer in that sort of department. She's 40 years old, still at a playing at a very high level, and still very respected amongst the tennis industry. Candace Parker in the WNBA, she's 35.
Diana Taurasi.
Yeah, Diana Taurasi as well. All those the WNBA stars. They're still playing at a very high levels. Sue Bird, she was playing up to like around 40 in her career, and so definitely, there is a path there. But I do agree. Yeah, social pressure is definitely a big reason why many athletes retire at a very young age compared to male athletes, like Tom Brady. He's still playing probably until he's 45, and there's no real social pressure for him to retire. Mostly just people who just are tired of Tom Brady, but that's a different sort of thing.
And maybe that changes over time, because we've seen women's wrestling evolve a lot over the last 10 or 15 years, and there was a lot of pressure on people for a variety of reasons. Basically, women on television in general, have historically been treated very poorly. They've been held to a double standard. It's a big thing with like women newscasters over the years, that once you hit 40, you can't be on TV anymore because you're not pretty enough, and women have to be pretty, and men can be like dissolving fossils and still be on television. And that stuff's changing in our culture too, for obviously for the better. And maybe that that does change, where it becomes more commonplace for women to be wrestling at a high level into their 40s, the same way it could be for men. In the same way, we're starting to see like that kind of crossover in, like what you said, shoot sports. But moving on, who else do you have on your list? I have 1, 2, 3. I have 4 names left that I haven't gotten to yet. We'll see if I think some of them might be on your list, some of them might not be.
All right, so this was okay. I'll say this. I was debating between these two guys. They're both the same age. They both, I guess, are still. I guess they're not really a Ring of Honor anymore. But I was debating between Bandito and Dragon Lee. I had to I couldn't get both of them on my list, and so I had to mark one of them off. I went with Bandito over Dragon Lee, mostly because of his look. He's definitely bigger than Dragon Lee, just by a bit, not by a whole lot. But I think he has shown, him winning the Ring of Honor title. I think that really sort of sparked a bit of a wave for a lot of people. It was a very interesting choice for him to win the world title in Ring of Honor. Obviously, that feature is in doubt whether he'll still keep the title after the restarts or not. I mean, who knows? But he has been booked in American Indies. He's the PWG champion right now, at least for now. I mean, who knows what's going to happen there? But he has definitely been around in the American Indies more so than Dragon Lee. Dragon Lee does have the New Japan bump. At least before the pandemic. I mean, he hasn't really been part of New Japan at all, not even strong. But from what reports have been saying, at least according to Dave Meltzer, Bandito and Dragon Lee do want to work with New Japan. However, it seems like the AAA connection might make things a bit muddied. And so if Bandito can work for New Japan again, like he did working with the best of the Super Juniors, I think that'd be a very good trajectory for his career to really boost him up a higher level, because I think he has shown a really good potential in the ring. Obviously his feats of strength are very fun to watch. Him just throwing guys, picking them up and all that stuff. That's very fun to watch. Obviously he has worked his strong lucha style as well. And that's sort of why I went with Bandito over Dragon Lee. I don't know what you think about that, Jesse.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you were to ask that question a few years ago, I think everyone would say, like I didn't even consider Dragon Lee for this list.
Oh, okay.
Which was, maybe a whiff on my end, but part of it is like, Dragon Lee, for a number of reasons, I feel like he's been less prominent. Part of that was that Ring of Honor in general is down. Part of that is that he stopped working in New Japan regularly when he was doing that a few years ago. I think he's had injuries. There was a whole instance where he was like on like this Mexican Big Brother like show, and like
yes.
he like was missing bookings because he like kept staying in the show and he wasn't getting voted off. And like I remember each week in the Observer, like Dave would write like, Dragon Lee wasn't able to make his date in Mexico because he's still on the show. It's like they won't vote him off, and I don't know. He just feels like he's not as prominent, and part of that is just being in Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor is not as prominent as it used to be. Bandito is really interesting. I didn't have him, but part of that might just be, again, I didn't really think of Ring of Honor guys that much, to be honest. But he does have. It's very different than Jungle Boy, but he did have like an innate charisma about him. It's kind of hard to describe when you watch him wrestle. He does cool moves, like you said, but a lot of guys do cool moves.
Yeah, that's true.
There's something about like he doesn't speak. There's something about the way he works and the way he wrestles, and his mask is cool and everything, and he's got a cool name, and he just comes across as like this cool guy that people like, and he's done very well. I mean, he wasn't like this huge star in Mexico that came to the US. He was working, I believe, like Mexican indies in like the Tijuana area, and then started working Southern California, and then ended up in PWG, and that kind of put him on the radar screen. And he did the main event at all the All In show, and obviously walked right into Ring of Honor, into a top spot. I think he got the biggest Ring of Honor contract in history up until that time, when they signed him. So there was a bidding war for him, and like he does check like all of the boxes that you would want in a young guy. And like you said, still, how old is he? 28?
26.
Yeah, so he's only 26. So like a lot of room for him to grow, and he definitely seems like somebody. Don't know what he's going to do, now that Ring of Honor is kind of gone away. So pseudo is like kind of pseudo being ended.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he would seem like someone that if he were to sign with AEW would probably be pushed fairly prominently, especially when you consider that he was pushed in the main event of All In.
Yeah, clearly the Bucks, or someone, Cody Omega likes him. And yeah, like he's worked with the Crash in Mexico. But yeah, it definitely seems like his success is more linked towards American success rather than Mexico. Again, he has expressed desire to work with AAA. AAA, obviously, why wouldn't they want him? But again, like I said before, he wants to work with New Japan as well, and New Japan and AAA aren't really friendly right now. So it's an interesting choice to make for him while he's working the Indies.
Well, the key to that would be working for AEW, because you can work for AAA and New Japan.
There you go.
If you want to, and they won't. I presumably wouldn't get mad at you if you did that. Well, I think that the big thing between New Japan and AAA was that New Japan had a relationship with CMLL.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's as strong as it used to be. I have to check on that. Everything CMLL is in complete chaos, so it might be possible that that relationship could have changed, and therefore AAA might be a more reasonable place for people who work New Japan to work as well. Mm-hmm. Moving on, I'll start with Darby Allen, who's 28 years old. Again, promptly featured on AEW, and Darby, some people were talking about him as potentially being like most outstanding wrestler earlier this year, which he would be an unconventional pick. But when the guy goes out there, he's always good. He always has a good match. He always has an entertaining match. He always looks like he's going to kill himself, whether it's him doing a crazy stunt or just him like getting laid out because he was running so fast and someone hit him with a move. He just brings it every night. And what really sets Darby apart from, I think, almost everyone else in wrestling is his originality, his authenticity, and his creativity when it comes to how he presents himself. I think what he's been able to do with his filming his own vignettes, which have these very distinct styles and themes, and they're unlike anything else in wrestling. I think that's really helped him. To me, it's like the coolest thing in the world that this guy's like doing that kind of stuff. And there's some of them have been really good. Like one came across my timeline from last year when he was feuding with Brian Cage, and he's doing the what's the test where you look at ink blots?
Rorschach.
Yeah, the Rorschach test.
Yep.
And there's like one of them is like a clear silhouette of Brian Cage, and like he's like, "What do you see?" And he's like, "I see a puppet. I see a bully." It's like and I'm like, remember this? Remember how awesome this was? I'm a huge sucker for the vignettes. I just think he's cool as shit, man. I don't know what to say. And he just always delivers when he's in the ring. So I had to include him. And he's got a connection with young people. He's such a young person. Like some of these people like MJF, who's young, he connects with a lot of older fans because he reminds them of Roddy Piper and Ted DiBiase and these old names and stuff like that. But Darby's very much a guy who connects with like you and me and people younger than us, as far as just like someone who feels like a cool person we know from like high school, as opposed to like a cartoon character.
Yeah, which MJF purposefully is like he's purposefully our cartoon of those classic characters from the 80s, the 70s, and all that stuff. But yeah, Darby Allin is also on my list as well. Like you said, he's very relatable. I guess mostly to us, because we know a Darby Allin in high school. As opposed
I wanted to be Darby Allin in high school.
Exactly, and I think I have noticed that like some older fans, they aren't a fan of Darby Allin. They are a fan of his character, which I guess, it is different from what they're used to. And, it's just other aesthetics things that they may not like. But for me, for Darby Allin, I think he is a very underrated technical wrestler. More so, especially from a jump from what he was doing in the indies. I think that may have to do with him. Dean Malenco seems to really like him. Anytime he does interviews, he always he praises him. He is, I think everyone at AEW sort of works with each other, but Dean Malenco seems to work with Darby Allin a lot backstage, and you can definitely see those influences there in his technical style. But yeah, like when he's darting through for a tope suicida, like it is very violent, it is very fast, it is so legitimate. It really takes that term, the tope suicida, legitimately. Like he is just darting through. The production style for the AEW helps out as well, where he just pops out of nowhere when he does that is so great. For AEW production, I have some criticisms of it, but whenever they capture Darby Allin just flying in out of nowhere, that is just A+ camera work and production from them.
And when you're doing a move that everyone does all of the time, but like whenever you do it, it's awesome. I think that really says something about your work and your tenacity. And I didn't know the thing about Dean Malenco, that he was so hands-on with Darby. And you're right about like, I think he's underrated technical wrestler. I think it's really funny. He says like he finished like second in the state in high school as like amateur wrestling.
Oh, okay.
Like this thing, which is like something that you just would not expect from Darby Allen, and like he just like has that in his bag if he needs to. But yeah, I mean, he's a great candidate. Who else do you have?
This one is a pure potential pick.
Okay.
It is Dante Martin. He is 20 years old. Obviously, he is in a tag team with his brother Darius, who's I think he's still out with an ACL injury. That's probably gonna take a while there, but he is sort of in a partnership / tag team with Lio Rush. It's a very interesting dynamic of those two guys there, with Dante sort of being more hesitant, but I think it is for the partnership itself. I think it is helping Dante have more of a character and get a little bit more time in promos. Obviously, Leo is there to do more of the talking, which he's very good at. And he can also be a candidate as well. He's also under 30, but Leo Rush didn't make it there. But for Dante Martin, he's literally a human pogo stick. Like the hops he has is insane to watch. And I guess it is kind of disappointing that he mostly shows us off in dark elevation where the stakes aren't really that high. But the way he jumps over the corner post for those dives is just insane. He is flying everywhere. He has the signature move, the double springboard jump moonsaults. That is just insane to watch every single time. He's definitely working more towards his in-ring work. Just more, I guess, I'm sure some veterans telling him, hey, you gotta slow down, kid. You gotta slow down. You can't be flying everywhere. There's the veterans that I'm sure someone in AEW is telling him that, because I have noticed that he has timed out his high flying performances, which I guess he should do. It's very reasonable to do that. But a ton of potential for him. 20 years old. And again, promo work and character work definitely needs a lot more work. But you can definitely see he's slowly sort of getting there with his partnership with Lio Rush.
Yeah, I didn't have Dante on here purely because I just didn't think he had accomplished enough. I think, like I said, we kind of had different approaches to the list in some ways. But everything he said is true. And AEW really wants him to be good because he has matches. He has I feel like he has more matches on TV than anybody else in AEW. He works Dynamite or Rampage every week, sometimes both. They're clearly really high on him, and he's just so young, mind-blowingly young. Like I was looking at, everyone uses Damian Priest as the old person who you didn't think is really old is actually really old because he's 39.
Yeah.
And it's when Dante Martin will be Damian Priest's age in 2040, right? Dante Martin will be, Chris Jericho's age in 2052. It's just these mind-blowing ideas when you think about how long his prime can be, how long his future in the business can be. He reminds me a lot of Will Osprey at the same age, where he's just this incredible athlete that makes these really complicated moves look good and look easy and effortless. So he always really is just very impressive in that regard. And I'm really impressed by how much AEW sees in him, how much they want him to be good. And he's just got so much of his future in front of him. It's really crazy just because of how, and a lot of these guys all these guys are young, obviously, but with Dante, it's wow, he's 15 years away from his prime. And what other, there's no, even in real sports, you don't get that unless you're looking at sophomore basketball players or something like that, or high school football players or quarterbacks, where you're this guy's 15 years away from his prime. And he has everyone's saying, oh, he needs to learn how to promo, and he needs to learn how to do this, and he needs to learn how to do that. I'm yeah, he should need to know how to learn to do a lot of things. He's only been wrestling a few years and he's 20 years old. He's far from a complete package. But the fact that if you're 20 years old and you can go out and you can have an above average match on American television, that's a huge feather in his cap. And hopefully he's able to stay healthy. Hopefully he's able to add a lot to his game. I'm happy that he's in AEW, and it'll be an interesting example to see how can AEW develop somebody who's so raw but has so much potential, and how can they do that by having them on TV every week. And it'll be an interesting example to see how he improves. someone else I have on this list. I will. Okay. I'll save it for later. But here's somebody who I think would have been on everyone's list a year or two ago and is probably not on a lot of lists this year, and that's Ria Ripley. As far as what has happened to her in WWE, as far as going from being someone who looked like a potential very top star in the company to being reduced to a mid-card tag team role. But kind of ignoring how she's been presented by WWE, I still believe in her potential as a top star. I believe in her physicality. I believe in her style. I believe in her in-ring ability. I believe in her potential as like a marketable personality that's different from what a lot of the regular, WWE women performers or just women performers in general. Just like a really talented individual that I think has gotten a really bad hand in WWE. And there's a lot of people like that in WWE, unfortunately, and that's why there's probably not a lot of the people on this list. But she's someone who I think stands out as a female performer, only 25 years old, just has a really good aura around her. Like, I think she's only listed at like 5'8" or something like that, but she feels like she's like 6'2". Like she just has this physical presence about her that other people just don't have. And she's a good worker and she knows how to do stuff in the ring. And I just think she's been dealt a bad hand in WWE. But if you were to say like who are like the most talented people under the age of 30 that you would want to have if you were starting a promotion, I would definitely be like, she's someone that I can do a lot better with if I'm a booker or I'm a creative person. Like if she went into AEW, I think I have no doubt she would kill it because she's killed it. She killed it on the indies when she was around in Australia and the UK. She killed it when she got in NXT and they actually had people back there who understood how to book her. It wasn't until she got to WWE's main roster where things fell apart for her. So I fully believe in her talents. If the results haven't been there due to bad booking.
Yeah, Rhea Ripley rounds out my top 10 list as well. She's 25 years old. Like you said, she's been dealt a very bad hand. Moving to the main roster. I don't think it was too early, but maybe too early for Vince, who wanted to push Charlotte instead, because that was definitely a disastrous sort of move for her, losing the NXT title to Charlotte, mostly just an effort to pop ratings, which ultimately didn't really do much for them. I remember, I think it was asked on media calls of like, oh, what's going to happen with Rhea Ripley and Charlotte, and Triple H or Paul Levesque, he would say, oh, guys gotta relax, oh, we're telling a story here, you gotta wait and see. We waited and saw, and nothing really came of it. Rhea Ripley never really got her momentum back from Charlotte any sort of meaningful way, at least. And yeah, ever since then, she hasn't really done much on the main roster. She's had a tag team with Nikki ASH, and that's a very big demotion from being in the world title scene from there. And I remember, I think this is the one episode that NXT actually beat AEW was the night she won the title, I believe. I could be wrong. I probably should have fact checked that. But yeah, definitely her winning the world title, her winning the NXT title was a big moment for NXT in the early run between them in the Wednesday Night War. And you could just feel the energy from all that. She's obviously the roster came out and, they put her on her shoulders and all that. It was a very big moment for her, and it seemed like a forward path for her to be a big star in WWE. But of course, seems like Vince McMahon had other plans for her.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, and there are probably some other people in WWE you could name that fill a similar void where it's like I wish they were in a different situation. Some of my honorable mentions, like Pete Dunne and Tyler Bate, would be two people that just like wish we're doing something better than what they're doing now. Do you have anyone left?
No, that Rhea Ripley was my 10th, and so yeah, I have some other honorable mentions also.
Well, let me do my. Maybe they come up under mine. I have two left.
Oh, okay.
The first one I have left is Sammy Guevara.
Okay.
in the case for Sammy, again, another prominently featured AEW name. But what I really like about Sammy is that he just, no matter what they ask him to do, no matter what he's doing on the show, he always is giving like complete maximum effort and really wants things to be great. He doesn't half-ass anything. If he's in a match, he's going to try to have the absolute best match possible. If he's going to be doing a backstage skit, he's going to try to do as well as possible. If they want him to get hit by a golf cart, he's going to do the best possible golf cart spot you can imagine. If they want him to kill time in between breaks, he's going to come out with the no cards and do like his shtick and stuff like that. He just is one of the most, and he's been a babyface and he's been a heel. He just is one of the most reliable performers on television right now that you can just count on night in and night out, no matter what you ask him to do, to perform at a high level. And, you know, he's 28. He's got plenty of potential in his future, you know, as a main event star. I think AEW understands that. He's the TNT champion right now, which is a big deal in AEW. And he's just a guy that's like, all right, like he had the match against Jay Lethal for the TNT title. And it was like, you know, it was kind of coming off the high of the pay-per-view. And it's like, are you going to, what are Sammy and Jay Lethal going to do? And Sammy just wanted to have a great match so bad. And he's, you know, he's doing the big, you know, what do you do, a 450 or 630 through a table.
Yep.
He wants to be great really bad. And he's consistently entertaining. And I think that he definitely should be on this list. Was he on at least your honorable mentions?
He was
tough grader, Jason.
He's my honorable mentions. I think just barely missed it for me. I definitely agree. He's very reliable performer. I think with his vlog, he's definitely created a large audience. I remember I was watching his vlogs before he signed with AEW, like he was just working the indies, and it was just more just wholesome type of things. You know, him going to the airport, going to different indie shows, and all that type of stuff there. And he just through that efforts, you know, he definitely I noticed, you know, other than the Bucks, of course, you know, when they did their BTE sort of things, but for him, his vlogs were definitely more the unique ones for wrestler vlogs. He definitely took a lot of effort into that. And you see that through his wrestling, like you said, like you could definitely tell he really wants to be the best at whatever he does, whether it is wrestling, whether there is vlogging and all that type of stuff there. Like he definitely puts a lot of effort into everything he does. And, you know, being under the wing of Chris Jericho definitely has helped him as well. Of his character work, more so than when compared to the indies. You know, I think I remember in the indies, you know, he's a heel. He has this big thing. He always just stuck the middle finger up to someone. That was the extent, mostly to the extent of his heel work. But in AEW, you saw a lot more of that, of his a branched out heel work in AEW, and obviously makes a natural babyface because of his in-ring style.
Yeah, and with a lot of these guys we've talked about today, the AEW guys, Sammy, Darby, MJF, Jungle Boy, these guys weren't like enormous indie names before they came to AEW. They were guys in the indies that people were aware of, and MJF was in MLW, and, you know, Sammy was a regular at PWG, and Darby was a regular at Evolve. But these guys really took off when they got put on on national television, and they got over organically. I mean, Sammy got the help of being chosen by Jericho basically to be in the inner circle as like his understudy, which obviously helped him. But guys like Darby and Jungle Boy, like they just got over because they were on television and they made the absolute most of it. And they kind of, once they were given a platform, an opportunity to show that they could get over, they got over. And I think that speaks a lot to the talent, what we're talking about. What you're looking for is like, if I put this person in a prominent position, can they get over? And I think we have a lot of evidence with some of these guys like Sammy and Darby and MJF.
All right, so you had 10th person, right?
I have one more.
Okay.
And this will be someone who probably maybe people don't, some of our listeners don't know that well, but I have SB Kento from Dragon Gate.
Yep.
Who is 21 years old, so he's the youngest person on my list. SB Kento, so he really hasn't been pushed as like a main event guy in Dragon Gate. And some people would say, well, Jesse, if you're gonna have a Dragon Gate guy, you should put Sean Skywalker, who has been pushed as a main event guy and has held their version of the world title. But there's something about SB Kento who just like, when I see him, I just see like he reminds me almost of like MJF in the sense that he's just a guy who absolutely gets it in a way that very few young guys do. He has this heel arrogance, this persona of like, he comes across to me as like this rich kid who knows that he's going to be really successful, and he's really cocky about it, and he thinks he's smarter than everybody. And there was a really good angle on a show in January where he was in Dragon Gate. He's part of the heel faction known as Red, R-E-D. And they lost the tag team match because Kento was being a shit and he accidentally hit his partner.
Yeah.
And he was what's his name? The guy who used to be Cyber Kong, Yoshida.
Yep.
Like, and Yoshida, who's like this established veteran in the group, gets hit by SB Kento, and then they lose the match. And Yoshida, like, basically is like, we're gonna kick this punk out of the group. He cost us the match. Like, fuck him. And SB Kento, and the rest of RED looked at both of them, and they just beat up Yoshida, and they sided with SB Kento. And it was just this great moment of SB Kento just showing like he's this like jerk kid, but he's got people on his side, and he's being proven right, and he's going to be vindicated. And Dragon Gate is not shy about promoting young talent. They're not shy about, if we have someone who's really good, we're going to push them right away. I mean, Kento's only 21, but I expect him to be, a main event fixture for a very long time in the company. If he doesn't go somewhere else, I don't know. Dragon Gate guys tend to stick around, but occasionally you'll see your Shingo Takagi's, wander off into a bigger platform. But to me, he's just like, he reminds me of like I said, MJF, where he's just such this incredible talent at such a young age. Even though he, hasn't main evented a ton of big shows or anything like that. And there are people that I kept off this that are maybe more accomplished in that regard. But to me, he comes across as just like this really, really big future star that you would want to have on your roster.
Yeah, his current Open the Brave Gates run has been very good. He's put out very good matches so far. And yeah, like you said, he's like a little shithead, basically. Like, that's the vibe he gives off. He has the recent pictures with his big puffy silver jackets that makes him look so like a little shithead.
And it transcends language, right? Like, I don't know what he's saying. Like, I don't know that, but you just know it's all of his facials and his body. He's got great body language. That's a big thing. He just has this body language of this very bored, annoying Gen Z person. I don't even talk about his work, because his work is good. He's only been wrestling for like a year.
He's a great ring worker.
Yeah, so that's my 10. What kind of honorable mentions do you have that you have at least jotted down? Some of them on my list, some people I had Jungle Boy that you had. I mentioned Pete Dunne and Tyler Bate. Who else did you have?
You mentioned Shun Skywalker. I had him as a Dragon Gate guy. He's 25 years old. Really pushing Masquerade up in the Dragon Gate faction rankings. Kind of a mixed title reign. Most of it wasn't really his fault, but it is what it is, right?
Well, it's very similar to, we were talking about Kaito Kiyomiya, in the sense that like they had a guy that they wanted and they pushed him.
Yep.
And he lost the title, and he lost the title in Naruki Doi.
I believe so. Yeah.
People, hardcore Dragon Gate fans, are going to get mad at us for not knowing that but we're talking about Dragon Gate, so that should help. But yeah, he lost the title, and it was kind of like, maybe he was really good in his title run, so I wouldn't say it was like a failure or anything, but it was like, okay, he's still got work to do, even though they, he's the leader of Masquerade, and they pushed him hard as like this new big baby face.
Yeah, some other Japanese stars I had were Konosuke Takeshita from DDT. He's 26.
Yeah, he's so young.
He's 26 years old.
And he was pushed heavy when he was like a teenager.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, oh man, I forgot about him. That's a really good one.
Kind of missed out from me, mostly because of my own ignorance. I'll admit that I don't watch a ton of DBT, but I've seen enough of Konosuke Takeshita to know that he is a very big star. For them, some other ones, Takumi Iroha. She mostly works for Marvelous, but she's been popping up in other Joshi promotions, even Stardom, working in their 5-star Grand Prix to work for some of the big stars. She's 28. Miyu Yamashita, 26. She's the ace of Tokyo Joshi Pro. Just great in-ring worker. Both of them are great kicks. They make really good gifts online. Also another American star, Calvin Tankman. He's surprisingly 26. I didn't realize how young he was. But yeah, he kind of works for MLW. He's been popping up in there for them, but he's mostly an indie star. Great super heavyweight, but yeah, I don't really know what his career trajectory is because mostly he works in the indies, and he mostly works those the clusterfucks for GCW. I mostly have seen him in there I haven't really seen him pushed as a big single star.
He's done some of the Bloodsport shows too.
Yeah, exactly.
Which he's done well on. Yeah, I mean, some of the guys that I had that you didn't mention yet, I had Chris Statlander, who I think is like a really, really good wrestler. Especially because she doesn't have a ton of experience as a worker, and I think she's improved. She lost almost a year with her torn ACL, but has come back and has looked great since then. I think she's eventually going to be like an AEW champion in that company. I think she's really good. She just has like a somewhat similar to Ria Ripley. They have similar body types, at least, like just like a level of physicality. When she does stuff, it looks brutal, and that's not always the case with some of AEW's women's wrestlers. Some of them look light. Sometimes strikes don't connect the way they wanted to. I feel like when Statlander wrestles, even though her character is somewhat goofy, like the business end of her work is very strong. I have mentioned Pete Dunne and Tyler Bate already. Riho is only 24 years old, of course. El Hijo del Vikingo from AAA. The only thing I didn't really say about him is that, like, I'm kind of waiting for him to be like the big main event star in Mexico, which he is going to be. He's probably going to win the vacant triple
the mega championship.
Mega championship. I want to call it the Triple Crown Championship. Vacant mega championship. And he'll probably have a big match with Kenny Omega probably sometime in 2022, which will probably take him to a new level, but is also a guy who I would be very high on from a lucha libre standpoint. But that's it. I also wanted to bring up a couple guys who are over the age of 30 that or who missed the cutoff. Hangman Page is 30. Ray Phoenix is 30. Kento Miyahara is 32. I just always think of him as being really young because he got to push when he was young. So but he's now 32, so he's off. Hiromu Takahashi is 31. Bailey's 32. So there are people that I definitely looked up and I was like, oh man, I wonder how old they are.
And also Britt Baker, she's 30 as well.
30 as well.
Yeah, she missed the cutoff for our list as well. But yeah, Liz, let's have a lot.
Yeah, some of these people recently turned 32. So it's like, it doesn't really, it's just a nice round number. It doesn't really mean it. Like I would still like say like Hangman Page would be someone you'd want to build a company around, so have on your roster. And it would be seen as a young guy. Because like I said, we talked about it, like there are plenty of wrestlers wrestling at a high level into their 40s. So, and especially in AEW, because the just guys don't work as much, like as frequently, like when it comes to like how many matches a year they're doing. Like, and then like John Moxley, like 1 year in WWE, he worked like 220 matches. And like since AEW has started, he's worked like 60 matches over like a 3-year span. So, it'll be interesting. I interested to see like how like long these guys who, especially in AEW, because they have the financial security of working in AEW, and they have such a reduced schedule, physically how well they hold up, if they're able to, part of the reason Darby Allen is able to like be this crazy guy and not really have significant injuries yet is because he's not working like 5 times a week. So maybe you can wrestle that recklessly and wrestle like that style for an extended period of time. If you're only working, 2 or 3 matches a month instead of the 20.
Yeah, it's sort of unprecedented, right? Like we haven't really seen this in pro wrestling at all. Like, usually guys, they retire early for other circumstances, a drug addiction, the alcohol addiction, and all that stuff like that. But for today's stars, that's not really a problem. There's no really party culture amongst today's stars, at least as much as it was back in the day for the older stars.
Yeah, I mean the business is totally different from like a long-term health standpoint. The party culture is not completely gone, unfortunately, in a lot of cases. And I think we want to talk about like speaking out and stuff that probably played a role. It shows that atmosphere is sometimes very alive and well. But yeah, there's not nearly the amount of substance abuse that you see they used to see guys, we have less people like in their prime just randomly dying.
Yeah.
From the health standpoint, not wrestling as much. There's not a bunch of guys walking around with like excess muscle mass, so you don't have like guys tearing pecs and biceps all the
Sure.
time like we had in other eras of pro wrestling. Yeah, and like you said, looking at my list, there's not really any like big guys on here. Like I don't know who the biggest person would be. Maybe Will Osprey. So it's not. It's just, and if you look at that from that perspective, it's a different. It is very much like a different business, and you kind of see that when you look at these talents.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest guy maybe like Osprey or Bandito, but even then, like they're not really that
Yeah,
big
they'd be
per se.
small by standards. I think. Yeah, I mean, you could throw in there are guys out there that you could throw in. I think how old's Wardlow? He's yet
33.
Yeah, so he's 33. So
Yeah, I checked that before. I was like, oh, how like Wardlow can't be that old, but because he is 33, but which makes sense. He's worked a bunch of the indies as well.
yeah, and like bigger guys sometimes get into wrestling later because they get into wrestling because they have a good look.
Yeah.
And so it's not, and a lot of times it's smaller guys who really want it that start out at a young age. Not always, but if you look at like the history, it's like if you want a big guy, you got to wait for them to finish their college football career. Then you got to wait for them to finish like their like going to NFL camp career, and then they get started. So sometimes they don't get started until later. But that's gonna be it. We're gonna wrap things up here. Jason, anything to say to the people at home?
Hopefully everyone had a good Thanksgiving, and whether they put your Christmas tree up or not, that it's perfectly okay. It's socially acceptable now to put your Christmas tree stuff up because it's December.
Yeah, no, Christmas. Yeah, it's Christmas. My Christmas tree in my house went up, I think, Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Of course, it's Hanukkah season and all for any of our Jewish listeners out there.
Yep.
Happy Hanukkah. And anyone else who doesn't celebrate either of those holidays, I still hope you have an awesome December as well. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Probably going to be I think that's going to end up being either our last episode of the year, or maybe we can squeeze one more in. But probably be doing some end of the year stuff. I don't know if we want to do matches. I don't know if you want to do individual awards. We'll see. We'll talk about it. But thanks everyone for listening, and we will see you in 2 weeks.